Hey everyone! If you've ever stared at a business ledger and just felt completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of numbers, let me tell you, you are definitely not alone. In today's explainer, we are going to dissect business costs, piece by piece, to bring some actual order to that financial chaos. We're going to take all that raw, messy data and turn it into your ultimate organizational tool. So here's our game plan for today. We'll start by controlling the chaos, then we'll break down our cost building blocks, check out how costs behave, ground everything in cost centers and units, and finally, we'll be cracking the cost code. All right, let's jump right into section 1, controlling the chaos, which really is the very first step to survival.
Because let's be real, a business absolutely cannot survive if it can't control its operations. But that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? How do you actually control business costs? I mean, you simply cannot control what you haven't classified. So we're going on a bit of a detective mission here to unmask these expenses, track them down, and figure out their common characteristics.
And that leads us right to this official definition from SEMA. They say cost classification is the, quote, arrangement of costs into logical groups with respect to their nature, function, or use, end quote. Okay, sure, it sounds super clinical, I know, but organizing your expenses into these logical groups, that is literally the superhero that saves a business from financial ruin. It completely stops the guessing and finally starts the controlling. Moving on to section 2, cost building blocks. We're looking at elements and prime costs. So, to build out our ultimate cost card, we have to realize that no matter how massive or complex a business gets, every single cost boils down to one of 3 basic buckets. Step 1, material costs. Think raw materials. Step 2 is labor costs, which is just employee remuneration, like staff wages. And step 3 is expenses. This is basically the catch-all for everything else, like renting special equipment or paying out royalties. That right there is our baseline. Now, when we take those 3 buckets and pull out just the direct ones, we get this incredibly crucial equation. Prime cost equals direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses. You've got to drill this into your mind because this equation is the foundational layer of our whole organizational system. It is the absolute core cost directly tied to actually making your product. But you'll notice a massive difference here between direct and indirect costs. Direct costs are the ones we can practically touch. We can trace them straight to a specific unit. Like we know exactly how many cardboard cartons we used or what we paid the waitstaff for a specific dinner service. But indirect costs, oh, they are sneaky. We can't tie them to a single product, so we have to apportion them out. Think about a factory supervisor's salary. That benefits all the products coming off the line, so it gets absorbed across the board. We also need to look at how these costs are treated over time. Product costs are directly tied to the goods you're producing or buying to resell, like those raw materials. They only expire and hit the profit and loss account when that inventory is actually sold. Period costs, though, they are completely different. They're tied strictly to the calendar. They were charged against your profit for a specific chunk of time, skipping inventory valuation completely. The perfect example here would be your everyday administrative overhead. All right, section 3, how costs behave. Let's look at the mutations of activity. Now, shifting away from those static categories, it is super interesting to see how costs actually mutate when they're put under pressure, like when production volumes change or time passes. Basically, they behave in 4 main ways. Fixed costs stay exactly the same no matter what you do. Variable costs mutate in direct proportion to your activity. Semi-variable costs are kind of like a hybrid of the two. And then you have stepped fixed costs, which stay completely flat right up until they suddenly don't. Let's break those last 2 down a bit. To really picture a stepped fixed cost in the real world, just imagine you're tracking your factory rent. That rent is a fixed cost, right? But only up to the maximum physical capacity of that one specific building. The moment your output goes beyond those 4 walls, you've got to go out and acquire a second factory. Bam! Suddenly your fixed cost just steps up to a completely new, much higher level. And then we've got semi-variable or mixed costs. This is where 2 totally distinct slices merge into a single bill. The classic example is a factory electricity bill. You've got that guaranteed fixed base rate that you pay just to have the utility connected. That's your fixed slice. But then, layered on top of that, you have a variable chunk that goes up or down strictly based on how much power you actually use. Moving on to section 4, cost centers and units. Time to ground this theory. So, to actually use these theories in the real world, we absolutely need a specific quantitative unit to measure against. You can't just walk into a meeting and say, hey, we spent $1 million. Someone is going to ask, $1 million per what? And that what changes completely depending on your industry. If you run a brewery, your cost unit is a barrel. If it's a hospital, it's a patient day. An oil rig, they measure per barrel or ton. Identifying the right cost unit is the anchor for your entire classification system. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Cracking the Cost Code, Secrets and Efficiency. Okay, here's the final phase of our mission. Believe it or not, your beautiful, highly detailed cost classification system is actually considered totally incomplete until codes are applied. A brilliantly designed coding system makes tracking everything incredibly fast and simple. But beyond just efficiency, it acts kind of like corporate espionage protection. It keeps your actual material data and physical dimensions completely hidden, safely behind a wall of digits. Let's actually look at how this numerical method works in practice. Say you're dealing with a specific piece of inventory like Iroko wood. We need to track its type, its length, width, and thickness, but we absolutely don't want to expose our exact material specs to just anyone looking at the ledger. So we use a code. Type becomes 1, length is 14, width is 4, and thickness is 0404. Just like that, the physical dimensions of the wood transform into an anonymous, highly secure numerical sequence, 1, 14, 4, 0404. To anyone else, it's just a random string of numbers. But you hold the master code. And that, my friends, completes our anatomical breakdown of business costs. You've seen firsthand how separating direct from indirect and really understanding how your costs step, jump, and mutate gives you the ultimate operational control. So now that you know exactly how to build a cost card, how to pinpoint your cost units, and how to lock it all down behind a secure code, what are you going to classify first? I challenge you to look at your own business chaos, grab these newfound organizational super tools, and start bringing some serious order to those numbers. Thanks so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and keep learning.